Welcome to the Focal Insights Podcast Founder Hour edition, hosted by co-founder Joe Pawlak. Joe has been in the e-commerce industry for over 25 years. He grew and bootstrapped his own startup to a successful exit. Founder Hour episodes go behind the scenes to learn how some of the best e-commerce brands were founded, grown, and operated straight from the founders themselves. Founder Hour is brought to you by Focal Software, a new generation ERP and operation suite for e-commerce brands and third-party marketplace sellers. Focal was built with SMB brands and marketplace sellers in mind to help them grow profitably. Now let's welcome our host, Joe Pawlak.
Hello and welcome to the Focal eCommerce Insights Podcast, where we chat with e-commerce entrepreneurs about business, selling online, and how to overcome challenges for success. Today we have a very exciting guest, but before we get started, for listeners not familiar with the podcast or Focal Software is an e-commerce operations software and marketplace account management company. So if you need help growing your business profitably, be sure to stay tuned to future podcasts or feel free to reach out. Joining us today is Dan Meinholz, who's the founder and president of A3 Performance, a company that designs, manufactures, and sells performance swimwear and swimming accessories to some of the top athletes in the world. Dan was a competitive swimmer at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he received a degree in psychology. He founded A3 Performance with his wife, Amy, in 2004. He also started a previous company called All American Aquatics in 1995. He's a national record holder and national champion swimmer, a self-employed entrepreneur for the past 30 years, has 4 children, and currently lives and works in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here.
All right. Well, we always start off the podcast by getting the background story. We want to help people that are thinking of starting their own business. Oftentimes they feel very motivated to get out of the rat race or for whatever reason. So why don't you start off telling us a little bit how you got into starting either business, both businesses. You can go back as far as you'd like.
Sure. Thank you. When I first got out of school, and I took a bunch of different jobs, and I worked in a number of different industries, and really none of them were fulfilling to me. And I was not really chasing dollars at that point. I was really chasing purpose a little bit more in what I was trying to do professionally. And saw an opportunity and kind of convinced my wife to join me in this effort. And that's when we started a dealership. So in 1995, we were both 29 years old and had 2 kids at that time, and just, decided that we would bet on ourselves. And I think that that's one of the things that you have to come to when you decide that you want to start your own business is, are you the person that you can bet on to do whatever needs to be done in order to survive first and then to thrive secondly? So that was really kind of the process. And we knew, we put our life savings into it, and it made my wife very nervous. I was not as nervous. I was very excited about the opportunity and just felt like, now it's all on you. Now you don't really have employees, you don't have partners, you don't have a boss, everything is on you. So it's, be as creative as you can, work as hard as you can. And then when you start to see some success, it really kind of fuels the fire. And then that sort of helps you get going. And with more success becomes that excitement, and the drive continues to increase.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say bet on yourself, because I often say entrepreneurs, I believe misconception out there is that these entrepreneurs are savvy businessmen with financial backgrounds, MBAs, and a lot of times that's the case. But in many cases, they're more like gamblers. They're taking a massive risk and they're just going to go for it.
I mean, we put our life savings, which was not a lot at the time. Like I said, we were 29, we had 2 kids, we had just bought a house, and we took our life savings and we went and bought product, and we rented a little retail store, and that's really how we started. And I just knew that, failure was not really an option. It's nothing that I ever discussed. It was just, how are we going to get there? What am I going to need to do it? We had some plans in place. We had thought out 3 to 4 or 5 years, what this would look like. Of course, you never know what it's going to look like. You don't know what it's going to look like in 3 to 6 months, but it's important to put that plan in place, and then you just go and you don't look back.
Yeah, and I like to use that too. Failure is not an option, and that's a very important thing, is to have that mindset where you're not focusing on the negative things that have happened or could happen, because you know they're coming. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you started the business, you're under some significant pressure, with kids and a house. What challenges did you face early on?
And so initially, because we are privately funded, I mean, one of our biggest challenges is, well, two of them really. There were competitors in the market that were better established. So you're trying to overcome their reputation, which is a challenge to do when you're new. And then, funding becomes part of it as well. It's like, do we have the money to invest into marketing? We knew that we could go and buy inventory and turn that inventory and make some profit. And the profit from those sales went right back into more inventory. So we had to try to grow that. And the inventory is important because you want to be able to service your business and service it quickly. But it's when you don't have a reputation and you don't have history, it's hoping you can get one sale and then service that sale as at a very high level, knock that out of the park, and it just continues to grow from there. And as we started to grow, this was really pre-internet and pre-e-commerce, but as we started to grow and we started to produce a catalog, which we don't anymore, then we started to see business coming from other places around the United States. And that sort of helped fuel us. But initially, really, virtually everything that we made, we lived on the smallest amount that we could. And everything else that we made went right back into the business. It went either into inventory or it went into marketing.
Yeah, and that really sounds like cash is always a big issue. That one's a given for any business, even when they're somewhat established. You have to manage it very carefully. But going up against some let's call them the big boys,
Yeah.
that's a little bit different. You have no brand, you have no logo, you have no recognition. Now you have a background in it, which helps. So you've probably got some kind of a network there. Is that what you relied on? Were you reaching out to coaches and people within your network to just get everybody you could aware of this?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I had good success. My wife was a Big Ten champion, swimmer. We're both literally from the same area, within 30 to 45 minutes geographical location. We met at the University of Wisconsin. So we did know people in the sport, but we knew them as athletes. They knew us as athletes. They didn't necessarily know us as entrepreneurs or business people. So it did take some convincing honestly, we had to sell some things at very low margins initially just to get a yes. And then once you get that yes, you just work to make sure that it's the best decision that customer has made. And it kind of grows from there. And I never looked at sales as a transactional situation. I look at everything as a relationship situation. So we don't look to see if we can just get one order from one person. We feel that if you work with us once, you'll work with us for the rest of your career, unless we give you a reason to go someplace else. But that really is our attitude. So on the service side, we need to be great. And we need to be ahead of the customer. And before the customer calls us with questions, we have to reach out to them and provide them information. Something as simple as, when is my product going to get here? The tracking number should already be in your email. It should be, that's the concept that we wanted to make sure. And it does a couple things. It alleviates us having to spend the time to service that phone call. And it makes the customer feel important because they've been given that information before they really even are started to look for it.
Yeah, and you mentioned low margins. I've got some background in the athletic world, and I would say that I'm going to guess that you had many instances where there's no margins, meaning you've got to give away a lot of stuff to get it out there, to get people to use it, because that's what the bigger companies do too, is they just flood these athletes with tons of product and make them feel, we used to call it gear rich. You got all this,
Right.
you got no money, but you got a ton of stuff
Right.
from these
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah, I mean, when we started our brand A3 in 2004, I mean, a big part of that is seeding the market. So, and then how much money do you have? How much can you seed? When some of the big boys can go out and put product on, free product on 1,000 athletes, and you're struggling to put it on 2, that's a difference. So you really have to be select the right person. But the cash flow is always a bit of a challenge, and it's regardless of whether you're starting day one or whether you're 30 years down the road. We're still very much in the same mindset. We're still very much in that hunger entrepreneurial mindset where a lot of our money goes back into marketing because we're in a growth mindset. We're not in a situation where we're trying to stabilize our business. We're constantly trying to grow, and there's a lot of market ahead of us. I still travel the country and have people say, I've never heard of your brand. So that to me used to be deflating, and now to me it's kind of encouraging, because really it's sort of how you compartmentalize that. And I've started to view those things as opportunities. So if you don't know our brand, give me a minute to tell you a little bit about who we are. And for us with our brand, it was very much also about being innovative in everything that we do. So I had a pretty good handle on the way the industry worked. And I knew that there were a lot of things that didn't work for the customer, didn't work for the dealer, weren't great for the brand, but that's the way they've been doing it for 40 years. So we really tried to hone in on what's the best way for our customer to receive this business, to be able to procure products, and what is the best, easiest, most efficient way for us to be able to retain and deliver products to them as well. But I think one of the things that has really started to get us a foothold has been innovation. So not just in business practices, but also in products. So we've gotten away from, well, just build something and put it in the market because we're a massive brand and everybody will buy it, to, if you're going to go with our brand, there's got to be a competitive advantage. And what are those competitive advantages? Preferably, we'd like to give you more than one. So we are priced below most of our the big boy competitors, as you said. We have an exceptional level of quality, and then our entire team here is super focused on delivering service. Like people aren't necessarily used to receiving in our industry. So those are things that we focus on to really try to build our reputation. I mean, last year we had pretty good growth, and almost all of the growth came from referrals. So that's something that I'm proud of. I'm not happy that we didn't have a tremendous sales effort, but there again, that's another expense that a small business has to determine. Are we going to hire somebody to do that? Are we going to do it ourselves? How are we going to grow? But we were able to have growth mainly off of referrals.
Yeah, and so what you just described there is one way to get more market penetration, which is a lower cost than some competitors, but that's very difficult for a smaller company because your margins are likely smaller than the big boys. So is that a business strategy where at some point you'll raise those prices, or talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so initially the knee jerk, the real easy go-to was, if they're here, we're going to be here, and we're just going to live on that, whatever that means. At some point in time, and we're kind of at that stage now where we're making a product that is so technologically advanced to what our customers have. The internal debate is, do we finally price above them? And that's a risky area, because part of that price, so price to me also has something to do with marketing, right? So if you go ahead and stamp a high level price on that, you're drawing people's attention to the fact that it's unique. And what does this young brand have that these other guys don't? How on earth can they be providing a product that's $100 more than the competitors? I think I take a lot of risks in our business. I think that was one risk I wasn't quite ready to take yet. I think that is something that's on the drawing board in the future for us, is that I know that our product costs more to build than our competitors, and we sell it for less than our competitors. So yeah, in that sense, our margin is smaller. But when you're building something that's technologically superior, that is a tough spot to be in, to be able to say, now we have something that's so great, we're going to charge more than our competitors. They still have that big brand name. We can be great at service. We can have all the product in stock. We can deliver quickly. We can do all those things. But if we're $100 more, are we going to have we built enough brand allegiance to be able to get that number? And I personally just haven't had that confidence yet that we're at that position to be able to do it. Might that happen 2 years from now or 18 months from now? I think that there's a good chance that will. Because we've just introduced a new product into the market that I think is tremendous. And when it's compared against our competitors, I think it's relatively obvious to the consumer that it's a superior product. But still, that being said, I wasn't ready to go ahead and make that extension on the price. But again, that price does mean something. So when somebody looks at the marketplace, when you look online, whether you go to an Amazon or you're browsing through a bunch of different websites, and you see that they're priced at a certain level, and then you come across ours, the customer may think, well, is theirs not as good because it's not at the same price? Or if you're above them in price, it's intriguing, but I don't necessarily want to pay that price because I know I'm going to get this big brand name for this amount. So I have a confidence level of what I'm going to get from that big brand. I'm still not 100% sure what I'm going to get from this younger, smaller brand. So that's something that we're trying to kind of blow up that philosophy or that mindset in the next year to 18 months, so we can start pricing our product where really it should be.
Yeah, the pricing is really a complicated issue. It's kind of a double-edged sword, like you said. If it's too low, then the perception is low quality. If it's too high, then you have to have kind of a luxury brand mentality, where you have two handbags that are almost identical, but one of them has a brand, and they can charge more based on that. So that's a whole different strategy, but it sounds like you're thinking it through pretty well.
Yeah, and that also comes very much into branding. So, like you said, you have to have that mentality, and you have to have that mentality in everything you do. So I think it's important to understand who you are as a brand, who you are as a company, and then really lean into that persona that you have for your company, so people understand what they're getting from you or what that relationship is going to be like. We do feel like we're, I wouldn't say luxury brand, because that doesn't necessarily have the quality per se, but we do feel like we're an elite brand. Because we're relatively new into the market, relatively new meaning, we've had an elite level product for 12, 13 years. We're in a big market. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money to be able to get people to generate awareness to what your brand is. So it's on our radar. We just haven't had the confidence, so to speak, or risk aversion to take that step.
Yeah, you're innovating, so you've got a better product, but there's also the education component of it too. Like, how do people know that? Because really, a lot of these things, like I said, they look the same, right? But
Right.
You've got to let them know what went into this and why it's better. And that is a struggle. Let's switch back real quickly too to, as you're getting the company up and going, your mentality was failure is not an option, which is key. But there's always I guess maybe an inflection point or some point where you don't really feel like you're safe until that point. So at what point were you like, okay, we're in business, we're going? And it was that, months, years?
Yeah. So honestly, with our first company, I think it was probably 4 to 5 years before I felt safe with our brand. That started in 2004, and the difference there is with a distributorship, you always have a vendor that you can fall back on, right? So you're selling somebody else's product, And there's that relationship there. You become, I kind of use the term like a vending machine. You become that point of purchase, but you always have that vendor that you can fall back on. When you become your own brand, you're designing and developing your own products, you're manufacturing them, and you're putting them out in the marketplace with your own brand name, there is no fallback. So that becomes, kind of a different scenario. So that becomes a different level of when are we safe? And, starting in 2004, I would say within the last 2 or 3 years is really the first time I felt like, okay, we're stable. We're really good at what we do. We have a good customer base, and now we're in a position to be aggressive and move this thing forward. So I wouldn't say it was months. I would definitely say it was years.
Yeah, and that's an interesting phenomenon too, because you're kind of precarious there, like you said, for years, and then once you get across that, then you've got the confidence. You're solid, and you're just so much stronger at that point. Is that do you have that kind of rush? Like, hey, we're doing this.
Yeah, and it is that thing. It's like we're out of the woods. I mean, when you look at a scenario and say, one bad season or COVID or inflation or shipping disruptions or any of those things could bury your company, we were able to get past that. It was asked at one point in time, actually, when I was interviewing somebody, they said, "What is your greatest accomplishment?" And I said, "Being here." Being here and 29 years in, that's the greatest accomplishment. It's not having an American record holder and an Olympic champion. It's that we've been able to weather a lot of different storms, economic downturns in 2007, 2008, and we're still here, stable and in a great position for growth.
Yeah, and let's you mentioned COVID. Let's switch gears a little bit to talk about some e-commerce work that you're doing, and how a lot of the people I talked to, COVID impacted them pretty significantly, and they had to make some business changes. They had to get more online focus because people weren't leaving their home and going to a store and buying anything really. So talk a little bit about your e-commerce strategy and what do you have going on there?
Yeah, so especially coming out of COVID, our showroom was shut down for almost 2 months, and most people were not allowed to really go out and do anything. So that's when our e-commerce started to grow. One of the things we haven't done is we haven't put a lot of money into like pay per click, for example, but we have invested into SEO. And we've made that a pretty significant investment for ourselves. And then we've learned also along the way how to write blog posts, how to write product descriptions along those lines to be able to rank higher on Google. So, our SEO experts said the best place to hide a dead body is on page 2 of Google, which is pretty funny when I heard that. But I'm like, you're right, because most people don't go there. So it's the SEO has really helped us begin to increase our ranking in certain categories. So we've actually done some research to find out what categories are our customers searching for online, and then leaning into those on the SEO side to make sure that our site is built into those terms. So that started to make a difference for us. And then, it becomes the entire atmosphere, ecosphere of digital marketing, social media, and e-commerce. So we use our e-commerce site for, obviously we want it to be a business tool and a sales tool, but it's also a branding tool. It's also something that contains information for our customers. If they see something on social media and they come to our site, we want them to be able to read our story, learn about our athletes, read about our product, learn about our technology, and hopefully that leads them into either reaching out to us for further questions or making a purchase at that point. So that direct e-commerce strategy for us has improved over the last 2 years, and it really hasn't been spend more money on ads. Now we do buy some ads, but not anywhere near, some of the experts that I've talked to that said you should be spending, this percentage of your total sales. We don't do that. we're not even close. We're looking for other ways. And I think that's one of the things I've always done in our business is the easy thing to do is say, let's go buy some advertising. I've never really felt like that has the impact that I've wanted it to. So the alternative has been, let's look for other ways where we can have a similar or greater impact that aren't going to cost us as much money on the ad side. They might cost us a little bit more money in the development side, but let's make sure that we're doing something that's going to, benefit our website long term. Once it's in place, we're going to continue to benefit by the e-commerce changes we've made.
Yeah, I think that's a good strategy. Is you have to have a very, very solid foundation of the basic stuff like SEO and your content, and then once you have that, then at some point you can throw some dollars at advertising because
Right.
it does work, but you've got to have the basics in place. So I know you've got a Shopify website. What other tools have you found helpful to use in either managing the business or online sales?
Yeah, so Shopify, we actually went through a bunch of different platforms before we came to Shopify. And I think the beauty of it was we had a site set up in 2 weeks and we were off and running. Since then, we've changed our themes and have done some different things, but we use JotForm, and which we can embed into our Shopify website. We actually have a lot of dedicated web pages on our Shopify site. So we've got probably 300 dedicated web pages that are only accessible through the link provided. And when we're working with a specific group, we will give them their own page. And then we can brand that page also. We can take their logo and put it at the top of it. So when they click on that link, they're coming to a place that speaks to them. So that's been very important to us. The way we come about that sale, though, that business is not typically through SEO or ads. That tends to be more of the relationships, visiting clinics, boots on the ground, being out talking to people, the referrals. That is how we're getting a little bit more of that type of business that's going to those individual stores.
Yeah, that's a great way to leverage that platform. Absolutely.
Yeah. Outside of Shopify, obviously we have a general ledger package that we work off of, that we do some invoicing and our bookkeeping and accounting from. But we have a POS system, which is Shopify POS, which once we upload that, it pulls all the products, it pulls all the customers. So if we were at an event, for example, and we don't do this a lot, but we do this occasionally. Maybe there's a national event that we're going to go to, and we're going to go there and display our products. We usually take along enough to be able to sell bits and pieces. We don't take truckloads of product. That's not real beneficial anymore. Certainly in the e-commerce age, most people can, they've been spoiled by Amazon where they can order something and have it tomorrow. So most people have what they need. They're not waiting for those opportunities. But when we do go to these events, we like to be able to take something along that if we're making a sale, it's coming out of inventory. One of the other things we use is a software called WebGility, which is a bridge between like QuickBooks Online and Shopify. And that's been a huge benefit to us because it allows us to keep our inventory accurate in both locations. Sometimes we're typically selling out of both locations. So if we're selling to a university, for example, that may be going into QuickBooks, which that inventory is then coming out of Shopify. When we have the individual e-commerce sales, that inventory is then coming out with QuickBooks. So it's a bridge between the two, but it's constantly balancing the inventory.
What about the big marketplaces? Have you got onto Amazon or had any luck with Walmart.com, those type of marketplaces?
Yeah, so Walmart.com, we haven't really looked at too much, and I don't have a good reason as to why. I don't really know that much about it. We did get on Amazon early, and the frustrating thing for us with Amazon was I felt like the rules of engagement and the rules of operation changed often. And we didn't necessarily have a person internally in our business who had the bandwidth to stay on top of the rule changes or even the expertise to fully understand how the Amazon machine worked. So we did have some early success there, and then that began to dwindle. What we've done since then is worked with partners that are Amazon experts. And, I get 4 or 5 emails a day saying, we can help you with your Amazon account. But what these partners have actually done is they actually purchase product from us, and then they're selling our product through their channels. But they're still promoting our brand. We still have a brand page on Amazon. I do think that presence on Amazon is very important, because I think like everything that we do that the customer sees is marketing, regardless, whether it's a price, whether it's a page on Amazon, whatever it is, whether it's the font that you use, it's marketing. It's helping describe an image of your brand in the customer's mind. So I think that it's important to have Amazon presence. I think the reviews on Amazon are important. We have people in our business here who, if they go and buy something from another website, they'll go to Amazon first to read the reviews, and then they'll go and buy it from the brand or something along those lines. So there definitely is validity and value to that. The bigger marketplaces, though, I do see as opportunities. We just haven't, like I said, we have a focus on the competitive swimming and the learning to swim avenues, and haven't really ventured into that, but it is something that we should be taking a look at.
Yeah, it just strikes me as with the way you've grown, your networking within kind of you're staying in your lane with the people that you know, and the coaches and the schools and all that. But yeah, maybe that's an opportunity for you to grow a little bit more when you get to that point.
Yeah,
Okay,
I was going to just say we make a great racing product, but our number one selling unit is a kid's goggle, and it's a great product. So when you look at if you're putting a swimming goggle on a 3-year-old, what is the purpose of that? What do you want to accomplish? Well, it has to be incredibly comfortable so they can put it on and they can wear it for a long time. It has to have an anti-fog coating on the inside of the lens that is the best thing out there. We have a patented anti-fog coating on the inside of our youth goggle lenses, so they can put on a pair of goggles, be in the water, play for 30 minutes without their goggles fogging up and then not being able to see. That is our number one unit that is sold, and that really kind of took off on Amazon. And part of it was a couple people bought them, placed good reviews, and then it starts to feed itself. But then Amazon kind of changed the rules, and it was, hey, now you can purchase advertising to bump your product up further. And it kind of got to the point where the margins were so small that it didn't make sense for us to invest more into expertise. It was almost as though we were, at one point in time, we decided, we were trying to decide whether or not we even want to continue with Amazon. And then kind of met somebody who was an expert at it and said, listen, we'll take your product and we'll do it for you. And I thought, this is the best of both worlds.
yeah, and those kids goggles are a great example of something that you don't need quote unquote athletes. That's any kid anywhere on earth can
Correct.
benefit from that product. Okay, so the e-commerce market currently sits at about $6 trillion. It's about 25% of every sale made anywhere is online. It's growing rapidly still to 8 trillion probably in the next couple of years. What do you think of the future of selling online? And you already touched on you're definitely keeping an eye on certain marketplaces and things, but how do you feel? Is that going to be necessary for you to advance or expand and grow online?
It's interesting. We actually even developed an app at one point because I felt like that was going to be the future. Like we could get our own app on everybody's phone, so it would make ease of access to our products that much easier. And that never really took off, and partly because the e-commerce platforms that are out there are so good on the mobile sites that you really don't need to have an app anymore. You just have the mobile site. So with Shopify, obviously you have a mobile site. That is where everything is going to. Now, the Shop Pay functionality that they have, once you enter in your information, regardless of what website you go to, as long as it's a Shopify website, your information automatically fills in. So it's really easy to be able to shop from anywhere at any time. The mobile sites make it a lot easier. We have people when we actually go on location who will order online while we're standing there. So it's that.
Funny.
And as the market, I don't know if I should say as I'm getting older, the market is getting younger, but that's the norm, right? I don't, the 40-year-old today doesn't know what it's like not to have a cell phone. So the 30-year-old does everything on their cell phone. And in 10 years, none of that is going to change, that's not going to change. That's just going to be expedited. So, having a strong e-commerce presence, and that's where I do think like diving in and leaning into SEO even that much more is going to be that much more important, because there's always going to be big ad dollars that your bigger competitors are going to be able to throw to become higher ranked than you are. And SEO is not as expensive as going and buying, Google ads or Amazon ads. So that is an area that we're going to continue to lean into. But it's not a question of if, it's a question of how quickly. More and more, like you said, 25% of every sale, and in 10 years that could be 40%, could be 50%.
Yeah, it's that's real. You said a couple things they're real interesting from demographics and things changing. People, even when they're at a quote unquote brick and mortar, if they're at a trade show with you, you're standing right there and they still buy it on their phone. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's interesting. And then there was a period there where everybody thought they had to have an app, a native Apple or Android app. And so it was crazy. And I fell into that trap with some past businesses as well. And it's sometimes just not even necessary.
Well, at the time, we thought it would be, a unique opportunity for us to be the first ones to come out. And like I said, we try to be innovative, not just in our products, but in the way we do things and what we provide for our customers. And shortly after we came out with the app, there was some excitement. We had a lot of downloads, things were going well. And then Shopify updated their platform, and all of a sudden their mobile app or their mobile site looked as good as our app, and actually probably functioned a little bit better. And at that point, it was like, do we really need to maintain this? Because we are maintaining two separate platforms at that point. So when you're updating products and you're updating artwork and you're doing those things on your e-commerce website, you have to now go into your app and do the same thing. And then you have to start asking yourself, is that extra time worthwhile? So I think eventually we'll be moving away from that app, probably sooner than later, and just doubling down on leaning into one avenue, because it is your front door. Your website is the front door to all of your commerce that you provide. So all of your information, your videos are on there, the story of your brand. If they want to go and listen to podcasts, for example, that have been posted that you've been involved in, so they can learn a little bit more, understand who they're working with, have more of an appreciation for the brand, because branding is so important, and customer confidence is so important as it relates to the brand. Those are the areas, those are the things that we want to continue to kind of excel at, and make sure that one place, which is our e-commerce platform, our website, is all things A3, and becomes something that also creates somewhat of a funnel. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a business. So you want to get people into the edge of the funnel and hopefully draw them all the way into a purchase.
Yeah. All right. Well, so far we've covered business in general, entrepreneurship, and e-commerce, and some tools that you've been using. So now I'd like to get into what I call the speed round, which is just going to be a couple questions for you, general questions, and you just give me kind of what your thoughts are off the top of your head. We'll
Sure.
go through them here pretty quick. So the first one is, what would be your number one piece of advice for anyone thinking of starting their own business? And you can't use "don't do it," which is oftentimes good advice, because statistically you have a better chance at the blackjack table than succeeding with starting your own business, which is crazy, but it's true. So number one piece of advice for anyone that wants to start their own business.
Sure. You have to have a plan, and it has to be realistic. And I think when we put together our first plan, I don't even know that we knew what realistic was, but we didn't really fully understand what was going to happen. I had this idea that if I bought a product at $10 and sold it at 20, I was going to make $10 on that product, and if I could do it 100 times over, this is what I would make. The reality is, you're not going to sell it at $20. And that was a painful truth. You're going to have to decrease your prices. You're going to have to give discounts. You're going to have to do some of these other things. So can you exist on that margin? It pains me when I see, in our local community, companies open up and 9 months to a year later, they're out of business. And all I can think of is that they were underfunded, but had they had a realistic plan, they may never have walked into that opportunity in the first place. They may have never taken that risk in the first place. So do your research. You may have a great idea, but you really have to put the numbers down. Talk to people who've been there, because they can help you walk through it and determine, is this the right thing to do? Maybe look at the market a little bit. So I would say, obviously you need to bet on yourself, but it's important for you to have a realistic plan.
Yeah, do your homework and have a realistic plan. Okay, next question. Successful entrepreneurs often say you need to surround yourself with good people and you need a little bit of luck. And sometimes they're one and the same, meaning that you hire somebody and they're just a superstar. But you can talk about either or both of those combined, or whatever you think. Surround yourself with good people. So building a team and some luck along the way. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, the hard part about it, the team is everything, right? Because they become your brand, they become your company. So those people have to not just be great, but you also need to take care of them to make sure that they want to stay. And finding good people is an incredibly difficult challenge. And I'd often say you hire 10 people before you find that one that is an absolute rock star. So, and it's hard to do that in one interview. Sometimes it's hard to do that in 2 interviews, and you don't know what their work ethic is going to be like, and you don't know, how they're going to communicate with your customers, and do they have your back, and do they understand how to represent the brand in a positive manner. So building the team is incredibly important. And I'm not going to say it's like a marriage, but it's they have to want to walk the same path that you do. Like, they have to see what the vision of what you're trying to accomplish is, and they have to get excited by that and want to be involved in that. And if you have that, that's a great place to start. Building the team is a challenge, and people are going to be what makes or breaks your company. Certainly, people can misquote, misship, create all kinds of problems financially and relationally for your brand. So having those people is very important. And then as far as the luck goes, I think everybody wants to have it. I think one of the most important things is that you keep your mindset where you want to be, and don't let the bad days get you down, because those bad days, it's how you conceptualize it. Those bad days are there to teach you how to get better. So it's very important that when you trip up, you identify why that is, you learn from it, but you keep your mindset and you keep your eyes on where you want to be, what you want your brand or your company to be, who you want to become. That's where the focus has to be all the time.
Yeah, and I think I always think back to Ben Hogan, the golfer, who used to say, the harder I work and the more I practice, the luckier I get. And so
Absolutely.
I think what he meant by that is you have to do the things that you just said and have the team to put yourself in a position to get lucky. You can't just sit back and wait to get lucky. You've got to kind of be there on the edge, and then there's always some good luck in business, and then it can happen. Okay, next question is, if you had a magic wand to fix one thing that's holding you back or slowing you down, what would that be?
I think probably the biggest thing for us is capital. I think not that we want to grab $3 million from somebody, because we don't necessarily want to give up, ownership per se at this point, but that's a great question, because I don't know if everybody knows that for their company. And I don't know if I know that 100% for our company, but I do think that what are my limitations today? And it's typically capital. And what does capital do for me? It probably allows, well, not probably, it allows me to add 1 or 2 more professional people that impact the brand. And it also allows me to be a little bit, I don't want to say adventurous, but it gives me a little bit more room when procuring products. We have products built in a variety of different places all over the world, and cash flow is constantly a juggling act. So, having a little bit of breathing room there would be great, but at the same time, being able to have a couple of additional professional people. Like I said earlier, we don't really have a sales effort. And I think that if we had that professional sales effort, I think it would have a tremendous impact on our overall business. But that's one of those things where it's, do you take that gamble and put the money into somebody hoping that you're going to get the return? At the same time, knowing that that person now becomes the face of your brand when they're meeting customers for the first time. So, in a small business, all that stuff matters. So I would say, capital is probably the biggest thing if I had a magic wand. I think a lot of the other things we're doing from a marketing standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, are very, very solid. That's probably our only limitation at this point.
Yeah, and I would agree with you there, because the question, the key part there, I think that you hit on is, well, holding you back or slowing you down. So the thing you can do with more cash, more capital, is you can speed things up. So if you have the vision, you know where you're going, and you're impatient, because everybody's impatient. You want to get there faster because you're going to get there sooner or later. So why don't we just do it now? And cash will allow you to do that, to those things you have to wait for.
That's a great point. I mean, exactly what you said. All it does is expedite the process, because either way you're going there. So you said that very well, but and it also takes a little bit of stress off. But it's okay, because the stress is what keeps you honest. It's what keeps you focused. It's what keeps your decisions efficient also.
Well, the stress is coming off in the future too. So just bring that forward with some cash.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, Dan, I think we're going to start wrapping it up here. So why don't you tell our listeners and watchers where they can learn more about you, how to find your products. I'm assuming that's going to be your website, maybe some social media stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So a3performance.com, it's the letter A, the number 3, and the word performance.com is our e-commerce site, but it's really, we try to make sure that that's all things A3. And we have, a little bit of a history on the company. We have specific technologies, like fabric technologies, that we brought into the sport. That's portrayed on the website as well. And then you can dive into individual products if you choose to. We're on Instagram at A3 Performance, and those are the primary places that you can find out more about us. So that the website really is the main landing pad to learn more about our brand.
All right. What does A3 mean?
So it's interesting. The very first company that we started was called All American Aquatics. And that was a distributor. And we owned the distributor when we started to build some of our own products. And the way I used to write out my ideas was, instead of writing out the company name, I just wrote A3. And that eventually became the brand. So that eventually became the brand. When we closed the distributorship, it was just A3 Performance, because we wanted to be a performance-driven company with performance-driven products. So we felt that it was important to put that in our name.
Yeah. There's always a story behind the name and the logo as well. So,
right.
All right. With that, I think we're going to wrap up today's podcast. So, Dan, thanks so much for sharing your experience with our listeners. And thanks to everyone listening and watching. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Focal Insights Podcast. If you like this episode, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you can be alerted of new episodes. See you next time.